Hello everybody and welcome to today's webinar titled The Good, the Bad, and the ISO 55000. Please know that we encourage you to ask questions during the webinar session through the questions box, as we will get to them at the end of the session. Today's webinar will be recorded and available to you through our website, vestapartners.com, together with the presentation in just a couple of days. Without further ado, I would like to introduce to you our speaker for today's webinar, Terry Wireman. Terry serves as the Senior Vice President of Strategic Development at Vesta Partners, leading the maintenance and reliability seminars and trainings. For over 2 decades, Mr. Wireman has been specializing in the improvement of maintenance management and reliability. He helps customers develop best-in-class maintenance and reliability policies and practices. As an international expert in maintenance management, he assisted hundreds of clients in North America, Europe, and the Pacific Rim to improve their maintenance effectiveness. Terry, we pass the stage over to you.
Thank you very much, and I will look forward to doing the presentation today. Interesting title, The Good, the Bad, the ISO 55000. What we want to do is take a few moments and look at some of the good things that's going on in industry, some of the bad things that may be limiting us in the near future, and how the new ISO 55000 asset management standard can have an impact in these areas. So in the ISO 55000 realm, particularly when you get into the 55001 document, you're going to notice that there's a management system structure in place. And it'll start with organizations, leadership, plans, support, the operation, how we evaluate the performance of the organization, and how we can make improvements. So we're going to spend some time looking at that towards the end and how that can kind of move us into the future. But let's start by looking at the good. Now here's 3 things. They're all related, and we'll spend some time on each one of them. The Internet of Things, big data, and visualization. Now, the Internet of Things has been around for a little while, but let's see where we're at with it. Daniel Burris in Wired back in 2014 says that it revolves around increased machine-to-machine communication. You've got a network of data-gathering sensors, and it's making everything in our lives from street lights to seaports smart. And if you can think about that statement about from street lights to seaports, well, you start with a smartphone, and just today with the sensors that are around, how many things can you do with your smartphone that 10 years ago we used to look at and go, oh, that's science fiction. But it's going to make an impact on literally every industry imaginable, whether it's agriculture, energy, security, disaster management, healthcare. There's more and more ideas, and people are coming up with newer and newer ways. It seems like there's a new gadget or new device that we can control or that can do something smart for us in our homes. It seems like it's coming up every day. Bernard Marr in the Forbes magazine article back in 2015, he said, I believe the Internet of Things will change every business. And we're seeing that. People are finding, again, in businesses, newer and newer ways of using technology. So the Internet of Things will allow companies to make smarter products. It's going to enable smarter business operations and smarter decisions because you've got all of the sensors sending us information, and it'll allow us to make quick changes to our business models. So the Internet of Things, with all the sensors, the devices that are feeding us all of this data, it's a very good thing. Now the question is, can we utilize it properly? And that brings us up to the second point under the good, which is big data. Now when we talk about big data, a little definition, it's a broad term for data sets that are so large or so complex that the way we used to look at our data is basically inadequate. How do we analyze it? How do we capture it? How do we share it? How do we store it? Because there's a lot to storing this data. Now, sometimes we're not necessarily talking about the size of the amount or the amount of data that we have, but it can also refer to using predictive analytics. And we've probably heard a lot about analytics in the last little bit too, to extract value from the data. So we don't want to just have, like the Internet of Things, feeding us a lot of data and all we're doing is collecting data. We have to be able to use that data, and we have to be able to extract value from it. So we need to see what we can get and the decisions that we can make that improve our business. Now, when we think about our data sets, they're getting larger and larger. In fact, when we started back in the 1980s, it's basically doubled every 40 months. And back in 2012, every day, 2.5 exabytes, which is 10 to the 18th, 2.5 exabytes of data were created every day. Now the question we have to ask ourselves, what are we doing with that data? Is it doing anything for us? Is it helping to change our business? And again, when we think about data-driven companies, companies that require data, they're not just flying by the seat of their pants, or the hippo type of an approach, which is the highest paid person's opinion. Sometimes we see that. But companies today that are really using their data, they tend to be 5% more productive and 6% more profitable than their competitors. So now when we start to think about how the data can be used, are we using it to make ourselves more productive and more profitable? If we are, we're getting good use of the data. If we're not, then we need to go back and look at how we can use it even better. Now, this was taken from an MIT document. In fact, the article was actually published in Harvard Business Review, and the title of the article was Big Data, the Management Revolution. McAfee and Professor Eric, I won't even try his last name, although I have talked to the individual a couple times, extremely knowledgeable. In fact, if you want to get some insights into data and our industry, you can look up Eric's his website. He has a tremendous amount of intellectual property on that website, and written several books that you'll find very interesting along the same topic and very readable. Sometimes from a maintenance and engineering and reliability type of an approach, we may look at it and go, I don't know if I could read that, but he writes in a way that is extremely down to earth and extremely practical. So this was taken from their Harvard Business Review article back in 2012 around big data. So when we get into big data, executives interested in leading a transition to using the data is, first of all, executives should always ask about the data. What does it say? Where does it come from? What kind of analysis did we use? And if executives start asking those questions, then people really come up with better solutions, better forecasts, simply because they know the executives are going to be asking the right questions. Another point about executives, if you're going to use big data properly, they have to allow themselves to be overruled by the data. When senior executives have an opinion at times, people will back off from stating a counter opinion. But if we have the data and the data is presented and the executive accepts the data and is willing to change, then that also sends a message to the organization. When it comes to knowing which problems to tackle, domain expertise remains critical. So we don't care what area we're looking at the big data in, what part of our business. Do we have domain expertise? Because those are the individuals, and I'm going to stay with the strength of my background in maintenance and reliability and asset management. If we have people that can ask the right questions, that can really give the data focus. And so when we think about breakdowns, or we think about equipment malfunctions, or we think about asset utilization. Are we getting the most out of our data? Do we ask the right questions to drive us to good solutions? So as we get more and more data, the role of the domain experts will shift, and they're going to be valued because they're asking the right questions. And then we use the data to provide the right answers. So 5 management challenges when we move into big data. First of all, leadership. We need to have leaders still in big data. The data doesn't become the leader. Another big point, and you're going to see this come up a little later on in the presentation, is talent management. Do we really have the right talent in place, and are we using the questions and the expertise that our talent has? Technology. Do we have the right technology in place to make these tools useful to handle the volume, the velocity, and the variety of data that we're going to get? And again, do we use it for good decision making? And what is our company culture? Again, as we saw the profitability that companies can see the increase in, if we use data to drive us towards profitability, we'll have a strong culture. Now, leaders can keep playing their hunches and they're going to get replaced. But companies that figure out how to combine their domain expertise with the data will definitely take the lead from their rivals. So, Internet of Things, feeding big data, how do we use this data we've collected to make better and better and better decisions? Well, domain expertise is the piece that helps us to develop the visualization. So when we get to visualization, it's really a way to display data, mine data, and put data out in a way that people can understand the data. Information visualization or visual data analysis really helps the individual that's looking at the data to understand what it's telling them to do. They're going to be able to interpret the data better simply because of the visualizations. So knowledge visualization, and there's been several texts, as you're going to see in a moment, written on this topic. It's the use of visual representations to transfer knowledge between at least 2 people. In the old days, before we had the technology, you might have done that with sketches or prints. Diagrams that even are hand-drawn on a napkin can sometimes make that much of a difference. But we get more and more sophisticated, and we're able to see the data clearer. We're able to see what needs to be done clearer. So the information visualization really concentrates on a lot of the computer-supported tools to develop new insights, to transfer those insights to different people or different groups. And beyond just the transfer of facts, it aims to transfer insights, understanding, experiences, perspectives, predictions. And if we can use the visualization to do that, we're going to make collecting the data from the Internet of Things into big data to visualization very effective and, again, very profitable for our companies. So when we think about the data, we collect it. It's a lot of information, doesn't do anything for us. Then when we get to the big data piece, it becomes more sophisticated. We're really starting to look at the who, the what's, the whys, the where's, the whens. Knowledge then is information that's been processed, and we integrate it into existing knowledge, and it provides a structure for us to be able to use it effectively. A good way to distinguish between information and knowledge is information resides out of the brain and knowledge resides in the brain. And that's why when we think about our subject matter experts, no matter what field we're in, the SMEs have the knowledge. Now, the book Knowledge Visualization by Robert Meyer he really says that it investigates the power of visual formats to represent knowledge. What visual format is the best to display the information so that we can convert it to knowledge? And again, it really looks at what of the visual representations are the best to improve the transfer and creation of knowledge between two people or more within an organization. So that gives us some of the good things that we have, some of the good things to look forward to if you're not into that already. But let's talk a little bit about the bad. If we were really good with IoT, big data, visualization, are there things that can hold us back? And I would like to focus on 3 problems that are developing today that we really need to investigate if we're going to be successful and really gain that additional productivity and profitability that we were promised at the start. And this really starts with our perfect storm, or imperfect storm, if you'd like that title on the slide instead. That is the aging workforce, a compromised educational system, and now the lack of technical apprenticeships that we see in our marketplaces today. So let's look at some demographics for a few moments. This came out of Confronting the Global Brain Drain under Knowledge Management Review back in 2005. And so we've had some notice on this. It says the number of aging workers will increase substantially. In the United States, the pockets of workers in the demographic from 45 to 54 will grow by 21%. Workers that are aged 55 to 64 will grow by 52%. Now, those are some interesting numbers as we see the baby boomers starting to bump up against retirement ages. Now, managing the aging workforce on Leopold and Volpel on page 26 in their text, it says the world is entering a new era of cost escalation. This is especially due to the significantly increasing cost of skilled human resources. It is a simple matter of supply and demand. The shrinking supply of talent and skills and the increasing demand for high-level, knowledgeable, and innovative labor forces leads to workforce cost escalations. And if you've been following our blogs on Vesta's website, you'll know that we did one not too long ago on the problems that we're seeing around this. The We Were Warned series actually started that. And when we think about it, it highlighted the Gulf Coast region and the lack of skilled labor that exists for the outages that are being planned for this year, and how that some companies, to be able to have their outages, are having to bump up the level of pay that they typically will pay the hourly workforce to get the work done. They're having to boost that to be able to get it. So some of this information, as it seems to be in the first part of the 2000s, 2005 to 2010, in that time range, it's coming true. They've sounded a little bit sometimes the little boy that cries wolf. We didn't see it. The recession was a lot of a problem there because it held a lot of people back from retirement. But now we're seeing a lot of people leave. And to keep the people, they're either paying more, or as the next paragraph or bullet point brought out, they're having to make significant investments in company facilities, health programs, retention and rejuvenation incentives, and even additional training to keep employees and to keep them active in the workforce. Enterprises today, and this is a key point out of their text, must see their workforce as an investment rather than just simply a cost that we're trying to control or maintain. Now, this came out of, again, confronting the global brain drain out of the Knowledge Management Review back in 2005. The number of 35 to 44-year-olds that are normally expected to move into senior management ranks will not grow, but will decline by 19% in the U.S., 27% in Germany, 19% in the UK, and even in Japan, 10%, Italy, 9%, and China, 8%. So we're seeing people that are not moving into senior management ranks. The demographics are such that the bodies just aren't there to move up. And for some of them in that, and we'll see this in a video in a few moments, some of them that are in that area actually do not want to move into management. And so not only don't we have the demographic head count to do it, we have a lack of willingness to move into that. This was a testimony before the U.S. Senate Special Committee on Aging back in 2004. The Employee Policy Foundation estimates that 80% of the impending global labor shortage will involve skills, not the number of workers potentially available. So again, we look at this and we don't necessarily have the right skill sets as well. The Employment Policy Foundation projected a shortage of several million U.S. workers by 10 million by 2015 and 35 million by 2030. Again, looking at the demographics, looking at the type of work that the millennials and the next generation want to move into, gives us pause quickly to see that we're going to be short people. Now, that's our aging workforce, the transition between the workforce. But now we also have a problem with a compromised educational system and lack of technical apprenticeships. So in the book, The 2010 Meltdown, Gordon had some interesting statistics in his text. 1/3 of all U.S. students are at the 12th grade reading level when they graduate from school, and up to 50% of current students, particularly in inner cities, drop out of high school. At one of the Chrysler car plants, only 1 out of 4 applicants can pass a test requiring 10th grade skills, even though they graduated high school. 45 million U.S. adults read below 8th grade level. And some companies have started doing some reading level assessments in their plants, and they're finding out that those numbers become very, very scary. In fact, at a workshop not too long ago, there was an individual in the audience that they had done that test in their plant, and they found that they were at 3rd grade reading level. So 50% of U.S. manufacturers find that their current workers have serious reading, writing, and math problems. Kentucky, the number of people over 25 who have graduated from high school was just 33%. So some scary statistics to think about there. Another study that looks kind of interesting in the 2008 issue of the Backgrounder published by the Heritage Foundation. The author went back and looked at an article titled A Nation at Risk and came up with his own on a nation still at risk. A couple interesting points here. The author highlighted the fact that the average high school student, by the time they graduate, will have roughly invested $100,000 in their education by taxpayers. The author also said this was not necessarily good because 26% of the 8th graders scored below basic in reading and 29% of the 8th graders scored below basic in math. So it may pay that much, but are we really getting what we pay for? And this, again, is not just a problem in U.S. industries. It's a worldwide problem. A 2003 United Nations study showed that 27% of the adults in the world were totally illiterate, and up to 3 billion of the world's adults still read so poorly that they are technically functionally illiterate for most high-pay or high-skilled jobs. So the worldwide educational systems, they may not be compromised. In some places, they don't even exist. So in a generational perspective, and I would advise you, if you're interested in this topic at all, look this individual up on YouTube. Garrison Wynn is his name, and he has a series of videos out there. But the one that we're going to look at is just on generational differences. And so I'm going to start this, and hopefully you'll find it insightful.
job to go on a ski trip. I'm sorry, you mean you want me to work late, like now late? My friends are going skiing. Job or ski? Yeah? And we think it's a work ethic. And so what do people say? I'm 45 years old and I'm old enough to have had a day. And we say back in our day. Back in our day, we ate dirt. We liked it. We ate dirt, handfuls of dirt. We walked to school uphill both ways in the snow in Florida. Important. You know, we had no shoes. We had no feet. We just walked on our nubs. We had nothing in mind. We had nothing in mind. Didn't even have feet back in those days. Right? And what do the young people say about us? An employee told me this at my company, 25 years old. Mr. Wynn, the reason that your computer crashes is because you're old. She also said, you know, I'm in a hurry, Mr. Wynn. I need the answer. I don't need the history of the answer. Yeah? But what happens to us if you're over 40 years old, you're on the computer, you're going, okay, having a little bit of a problem. And you start looking for young people. Yeah, that's what I do. We need each other. And old people, remember that these young people are not living in our times. We are living in theirs. Important. Work together. Love each other.
I've always found that video to be quite interesting, and so when you think about some of the statements he made, the instant answer piece. How often have employees today developed the Google mentality or the Wikipedia mentality? All I have to do is go to the internet. I can get the answer. I don't need to worry about doing any research. Do we have the information? Is it transferring to knowledge, or are we really making full use of it? In some cases, not. I had a friend who writes textbooks around calculus, and he said that the calculus gets a bad rap, and he goes, what you really need to think about with calculus, if you got a problem, he says you need to be able to go out, get a cup of coffee, go back into your office, shut the door, prop your feet up on the desk, sip your coffee, and visualize the problem. Well, sometimes in particularly maintenance and reliability, we don't take that time. It's hurry up and fix it, get it up and running now, and we don't take time to get the cup of coffee, to sit down and try to visualize what was the root cause. We don't go through the process, and instead we put Band-Aids on things instead of fixing the real problem. So Garrison Wynn, if you get an opportunity, like I said, to look him up, do so. The third part of our imperfect storm was the lack of technical apprenticeships. Now, I've got a quote here from Germany, and we picked on Germany simply because, not that they're worse than anybody else, but they typically have the reputation for being better than everybody else. If they're having problems, then you know the rest of the world is. So, in Germany's Deutsche Welle magazine, the trainee shortage is especially acute in Germany's eastern states. He says he predicts that in these states, the number of applicants for trainee positions have fallen 50% or will fall 50% by 2011, reflecting a marked drop in the number of qualified school leavers in recent years. This explains why so many companies are having problems meeting their skilled labor needs with young workers. Our companies need new blood. They need skilled labor. In Germany, it's becoming increasingly hard to find qualified young people to train. Now, if Germany can't find qualified young people to train, what does that say for the rest of the world? So some things to think about. Some other quotes. This came out of a study, and it was released by Manpower. Engineering jobs in 2008 were the most difficult to fill, followed by, notice this, machinists, machine operators, skilled trades, technicians, sales representatives, accounting, finance staff, mechanics, laborers, IT staff, and production operators. Now think about that list, and when you do, how many of those have an impact on our company's ability to make a profit or produce a product? So companies are having a difficult time in finding people, not just to train, but people that have skills. And yet it's ridiculous when you think about what these people can make. Now this is the chairman of Automotive Retailing today. The day of the grease monkey is dead. High-paying jobs, $70,000 to $100,000 a year for master mechanics go wanting because most people don't understand the industry has changed drastically. When you think about skilled trades technicians in your plants, and we've blogged on this on the Vesta website as well, when you think about those skilled trade technicians, after a 4-year apprenticeship, what are they making? How many skilled trade technicians in plants today are making 6-figure incomes? And a lot of people will go, well, yeah, but they're working overtime to get that. I don't know too many salaried people that work a 40-hour work week either. So we have to ask ourselves, are we really looking and evaluating the financial rewards that those types of job positions can have? Now, this goes in and talks about companies that invest in talent. They tend to be in what we call the success spiral. The death spiral, however, and we see a lot of companies in this today, where companies respond to downturns or other financial pressures by cutting back on people investments. It's often been said in companies today that when we have a downturn, the first 2 things that go are the expenses on maintenance or the expenses on training. And it can flip-flop as to what your priorities are, but it's usually those 2 that we start with. One or the other takes the lead. This results in the departure of pivotal employees and reinforces the likelihood of future poor performance and financial distress. And so we have to stop and ask ourselves, what is the cost of the headcount reductions, people leaving the company? When we think about that, and I like to skip to the second point, what's the cost of reduced efficiency or increased errors in a plant where 2 first-line supervisors just retired? What happens to companies when they eliminate the maintenance supervisor? What happens to companies that don't fill a lead position or don't fill the supervisor's position? What's the impact on efficiency and effectiveness? Some interesting questions to investigate. Again, from one of the blogs that we've done, we talked about gold-collar workers. In our antiquated system today, we break groups up into white-collar, blue-collar. And if we go back as far as 2001, and this is the first published point I could find on the gold-collar worker term, but back in Harvard Business Review of 2001, gold-collar workers make major contributions to their employers, the economy, and themselves. They are urgently needed in skilled technology careers across America and the world. So when we think about gold-collar workers, why do we use that term? Because gold-collar workers can basically name the company they want to work for, name the part of the country they want to work in, and can name the salary that they want to work for. And we're seeing that come true. Even though it was written in 2001, today we're actually finding people that want to get skilled tradespeople in their plants that are paying signing bonuses to get them in. So gold-collar workers, not too far from the mark. The good, the bad, and now what impact on a lot of these issues that we just talked about is ISO 55000 going to have? Can companies be profitable and still be ISO 55000 compliant? Is the standard gaining acceptance? What will it do, or how does it provide solution to some of the things that we've discussed and possibly even other problems? Well, we want to take a few moments and discuss that. You may remember from one of our opening slides, we talked about issues around the organization, leadership, plans, support, operation, and performance evaluation, and then our continuous improvement loop. Those are, if you go back to the 55001 document in particular, although it references in the 00 and the 02 document, the 5.3, 5.1, 4.4, those are all within the documents where these items are discussed. And so we're going to dive into them a little deeper. But just so you know, those are items that come under the ISO 55000 structure. When we talked about, back in a previous slide, we talked about management challenges, leadership, talent management, technology, decision-making, company culture. All of those things are addressed in the 55000 standard under the asset management piece of the standard. So let's look at the 01 document on section 5.3, organizational roles, responsibilities, and authorities. And so these are our shall statements, or things that we have to be compliant. Top management shall ensure that responsibilities and authorities for relevant roles are assigned and communicated within the organization. Now, how often do we go into organizations today and we don't have good job descriptions? There's not clear lines of roles and responsibilities. And it doesn't matter whether it's in finance, if it's in operations, if it's in engineering, if it's in maintenance. Anything that has an impact on a piece of equipment as it goes through its life cycle should have clearly defined roles and responsibilities. Now, top management shall also assign responsibility and authority for the strategic asset management plan, ensuring that we actually have the plan deliver on what's promised. When we get down to updating and establishing the plans, business just changed. Do we have a system in place to make those changes? Reporting on the performance of the asset management system to top management. Stop and ask, who's going to do this in our organization, or who does this in our organization? Should an asset manager come from maintenance? Should they come from operations? Should they come from engineering? Should they come from finance? Should they come from HR? Now, all of those are possibilities, and each company will develop their own way or their own area that they're going to draw from. The important thing is to be able to produce results. We want to make sure that our assets are adding value to the organization. Leadership. Does our leadership demonstrate commitment to the asset management system? Are they ensuring that we have the right people in the right places? Again, back to our slide where we listed what leadership should have in place. Are our assets focused on achieving organizational objectives? Do we know why they're there? Do we communicate from a leadership perspective the importance of asset management and making sure that we actually meet the standards? Directing and supporting people, supporting other relevant management roles. Again, ensuring that we have the proper pieces in place. Planning. How do we do in planning the actions that we need to take to address any risks or opportunities that we have? Again, we get back into what the asset management system should do. We want to make sure that we use it to achieve its intended outcomes, that we also use it to prevent or reduce undesired effects. That's where we get into our risk piece. And we always focus on getting better because our competition is always going to get better. So here we have another shall statement. It shall plan to address these risks and opportunities and how the risks and opportunities can change over time, and how to integrate, implement these actions into the asset management system processes and evaluate the effectiveness of the actions. What type of support do we need? And again, we've got the shall statement in there. We shall determine and provide resources for the establishment, for the implementation, for the maintenance, and for the continual improvement of the asset management system. So how do we set it up? How do we implement it? How do we maintain it? And how do we improve our asset management system. Now again, the organization shall provide the resources for meeting the asset management objectives and undertaking all the activities in the asset management plans. So it's not a matter of, hey, here's our asset management plan, go do that in addition to your regular job. Most people's regular job keeps them quite busy these days. Do we provide the extra resources for being able to implement and maintain our asset management system? So this also applies to proper staffing to ensure the activities are carried out as specified in the plans. So if we have certain things that we're supposed to do to our assets at certain times, do we have the right resources in place? So now, information requirements, and that's where a lot of this comes from. Where do we get all of this information? Do we determine the information requirements to support the assets, the asset management system, and accomplishing our organizational objectives? Now, think about what that says. The information requirements. What information do we need to make sure our assets are doing what their intended purposes are? How do we know we're getting enough availability? How do we know we're getting enough efficiency out of it? Where do we collect this data? How do we know that we are accomplishing our organizational objectives? Now, look at the A item. The organization shall include the consideration of the significance of identified risks, what could go wrong, the roles and responsibilities for asset management processes, procedures, and activities. Where's the data stored and collected from that's going to help us know that we're doing these things? Look at B, the third bullet point, how and when the information is to be collected, analyzed, and evaluated. The organization shall specify, implement, and maintain processes for managing its information. Who puts in the data? When do they look at it? When do they analyze it? When do I see it in a visualized report? All of those are questions that need to have answers. The organization shall determine the requirements for the alignment of financial and non-financial terminology. Sometimes we go in and we find that the maintenance management system, the EAM system, keeps one set of books and the financial system keeps another set of books. Don't we want a system that's going to blend the two of those and make sure that they are consistent? Because E says that there should be consistency and traceability between financial and technical data. So the information requirements is a very big part of that. And do we have a good asset management system like SAP that can make sure we have that check and counter check? Operations, planning, and control. We get into the corrective and preventive activities, which is in 10.1 and 10.2. But what are the thresholds that tell us we need to go out and do something? How do I take the sensor data that's being fed in, and how do I look at it and understand when I need to take actions? When do we do what? How do I know that it was the right thing to do? My data-driven KPIs. All of this around planning and control. Then we get into performance evaluation. And some people don't like to be measured today, but in the shall statements, it's very clear we need to look at our assets and understand what needs to be monitored and measured, how we evaluate and report on asset performance, whether it's technical or financial. And when we look at the placement of commas, there's a little note there. We typically are looking at the asset management system, and the assets themselves. And those are really three distinct areas that we need to focus. So the organization shall evaluate and report on the effectiveness of the processes for managing risks and opportunities, shall retain appropriate documented information as evidence of that we are doing something, and we have to be able to understand the needs and expectations of our shareholders and stakeholders. improvement. Again, when a nonconformity, we'll look at the bullet item under 10.1, when a nonconformity or incident occurs in its assets, asset management, or asset management system, the organization shall. So any of the three, the organization has to react to the nonconformity or incident as applicable, take action to control and correct it, and to deal with the consequences. So when we think about our assets, our asset management, and our asset management system, everything that allows us to accomplish asset management, we have to really look at those three and say, do I have nonconformities in any of those, and how do I correct it, and how do I deal with the consequences? So it may just be focused on our assets. It could be focused on how we do asset management, or it could be focused on the system we have in place to assure that we are doing asset management. All of those are very important. So we want to continue on, again, looking at what the nonconformity was, implementing actions needed. So we kind of get into a plan, do, check, act loop. And that brings us to one of the diagrams that you'll find in the ISO 55000 document, except it has one circle more than the document has. Managing the organization, the asset management system to ensure we're doing asset management. So asset management is a coordinated activity of an organization to realize values from the assets. The asset management system is the interrelated or interactive elements to establish an asset management policy, asset management objectives and processes that's going to help us achieve our objectives. The asset life cycle activities circle was the one that was left out of the final document, but this was in there originally just to show that these are things that we do to assets. The asset portfolio are the assets that are within the scope of our asset management system. This is one of the other diagrams, and yes, it's very confusing, but this really helps us to understand how everything comes together in the ISO document and how it does relate to our data, the way we can turn our data into information. So as we come down, we can look at stakeholders and the organizational content, very top. That's our stakeholder needs, external and internal issues, mission, vision, and objectives. It may also be activities that aren't controlled through an asset management system. Leadership's important, culture of the organization, motivation, goodwill with the neighbors. Now, the asset management policy supports the organizational plans and objectives. In other words, are we getting out of our assets what we thought we would? The SAMP, or the Strategic Asset Management Plan, are activities from the organization to realize value from the assets, whether it's operational, reliability related. So the asset management objectives shall be consistent and aligned with the organizational objective and the strategic asset management plan. As we come down to the asset management plans, what we do, how we do it to make sure we get the goals and objectives accomplished from the asset management plan. The organization shall implement and control the processes needed to meet all the requirements, and that's out of 6.1. Then the asset portfolio is what the assets we're doing this on, and then again we're into the evaluation and improvement. Now there's a light gray box around some of the areas, and that light gray box is to show what is in scope and what is out of scope. In other words, these are the areas that's going to be impacted by the asset management system. So there are some areas that are out of it. But think back again about our data. We've got sensors that feed us information about our assets. We've got big data where we have to turn it into something to do, and then we have to take action with it. And so all of this really does support what we're trying to do in the good and the bad. But we have to have skilled employees if we're going to be successful in meeting all of these goals and objectives. So hopefully we've helped to illustrate how that we have good out there. We have some bad that we need to overcome. But if we really focus on the ISO 55000 standard, and that becomes a way of life for our company, then we can actually kind of erase some of the bad that we've got and turn it into more good with our skilled employees. And that brings us up to our questions. And if you have questions, I'm pretty sure they want you to type those into the question box, and we will see what we come up with. So the first question we've got up, what is my opinion on the current status of the 55,000 standard, on the impact that it's having on businesses? Well, it was a little slow out of the gate. The standard is doing quite well. It took everybody a while to wrap their heads around it, to understand what the standard actually meant for their businesses. The impact that it's having on some of the business today, we're starting to see more companies become ISO 55000 certified. Slower in the U.S. than it is, say, in Australia or in Europe. We're seeing even some of the regulatory bodies in those countries start to reference the 55,000. That has not happened here in the U.S. yet. There is some improvements even as we speak. The 55,002 document is, and it's not the, it's more how to do certain things. It's not the specific shall statements, but it's getting additional clarification. So that it's going to be easier for people to understand what the requirements of the 01 document are and how you can implement it. So look for some clarification, additional clarification on the 55002 document to come out here in the very near future. So will the second question, the Internet of Things, big data, or visualization really have an impact on the maintenance and reliability communities? I think it has to. I think that we're seeing more of the. I lost my question there for just a second. Let me back down. We're seeing more of the skilled trades leaving. They're going into retirement, or they're moving on to higher paying jobs. And we need to be able to do knowledge capture. We need to be able to get our subject matter experts down and develop the rules engines that are going to drive the results from big data and the Internet of Things into visualization. So I think, yes, we're going to see an impact on maintenance and reliability, particularly as we use these tools to develop, well, if you want to use the expression, which this is always debatable, artificial intelligence for some of the work that we need to have done in our companies today. So hopefully I didn't mess that one up too bad. Does it make sense to have STEM-focused schools to address the global skill gap? Not completely familiar with the STEM acronym, but it starts in schools, and I'll start with the older days where we used to have a vocational arrangement, shop classes in some of our schools. Are we really getting people trained? Maybe not everyone needs to go to college. Maybe not everyone desires to go to college. We have a lot of them that aren't even finishing high school. So can we use some of the vocational systems, some of the shop class type things that we had in the past to complement this and supplement it? I think the answer would be yes. If you can help me with that question, if that wasn't clear enough. How can the Internet of Things be integrated into SAP? Well, you can already start to think about we can set up rules engines for if I have this condition, if this meter reads this, then I need to be able to go do that. I can have automatic work order generations. So if I can feed the sensor data into the system in a way that it can recognize a meter or an out-of-tolerance condition, we can start to generate work packages that will tell us what to go do. So that's a very infantile type of an approach, but it can work. Why has the implementation in the U.S. has been so slow? Is the lack of education, or is it the benefits of implementing 55,000 not showing the benefits that would pay off the investment? Really good question. I like this one. And here's what we got. We do not do a good job of communicating what ISO 55000 can do for our companies. And in the vacuum of not having that clear communication, we've got people that are hesitant to step in and say, let's go implement it. It should be, let's go implement it because here's the benefits we're going to get. A lot of this goes back to, we have never been good in my entire career. We have never been good at clearly articulating the value proposition of our assets to executives. We don't get it into dollars and cents. And so we can think back to maintenance and reliability. They've always had trouble communicating with the C-suite simply because they can't get what they do from a technology standpoint into dollars and cents. I think 55,000 has exactly the same issue. How will IoT be handled from proprietary SCADA protocols? Aha, there we go. That is going to depend on the protocol. So how do we get that information? It's going to depend on how well we are working with our vendors, how we can negotiate the use of those protocols, and whether or not we're successful with that. One of the constraints for asset management is the sense of job security in some employees. How leaders of the companies can try and sort out this issue? Good question again. How do I keep people, if they're giving up this knowledge, how do I keep people from being worried that they're giving up their jobs too? And it comes down to, we have to make sure that if people are giving us this information, that we are not divorcing them from the company. We need to make sure that we find ways that we can use them in the organization. And there's a lot of staffing issues around 55,000 or the asset management piece. There's a lot more things we could do with our assets. Can we be creative and find ways to move these people into those assignments? Because after all, they do have a body of knowledge. We're trying to capture that. We're trying to get it from them. How do we reward them for that? And I think answering that issue is very important. And so, Sarah, I think we are about at time.
That is correct, Terry. This is Asha. I'm going to take over. Everybody, thank you so much for joining us today. If you have any more questions, feel free to get in touch with us through the VestaPartners.com website. Terry, again, thank you for being here today, and we look forward to the next webinar.